The career of Alan Simpson has been marked by loyalty to his party, reaching across the aisle to secure legislative accomplishments with the other party, and speaking his mind in a plain and sometimes salty fashion. Does any of this sound familiar? Just as President Truman, a proud Democrat, forged critical alliances with members of the Republican Party, Senator Simpson worked hard with Democrats to pass a number of laws and critical issues, including lobbying, disabilities, the Clean Air Act, telecommunications, and even immigration that he told us last night, with Ted Kennedy. He served as a member of the United States Senate from Wyoming from 1978 to 1997, and he held a number of Republican leadership positions, including Assistant Majority Leader with our 2001 honoree, Senator Bob Dole. But beyond his legislative accomplishments, Senator Simpson is famous for doing battle with the media. His book, Right in the Old Gazoo, and if you hang around, maybe he'll tell you what gazoo means, is an entertaining critique of journalism and the power of the media. And he properly concluded that just as holding public office is a trust, so is a position in media and journalism a position of trust today as well, and I think President Truman would agree. And Senator, I would say that given the advent of Twitter storms and fake news and alternative facts, I think Volume 2 should be due out here in about 12 months. But today we honor Senator Simpson not only for his time in the Senate, but his devotion to the public good since leaving office, including his service on the Iraq Study Group, and with Erskine Bowles, co-chairman of the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform. That's the deficit commission that we all are fond of talking about. But Senator, given the many common traits that you share with President Truman, the Foundation is pleased and honored to present you with the 2017 Truman Good Neighbor Award. So he's going to take our picture here, so turn to the left here. Okay.
You want me to
I'm going to trade places, yeah.
Wow. Of all the introductions I've ever had, that was the most recent. And Henry, I too have the same feeling when I saw the generals. I was a first lieutenant. I still salute them. I can't stop. And I'm terrified of them on top of that. Well, congratulations to you, sir. We had a former governor of Wyoming, Stan Hathaway, who flew B-17s over Ploesti, and I understand you were involved in those missions on the oil fields that saved us. Well, I want to thank Carl and Beth Zobrist for their courtesies and kindness to Ann and to me. This is my wife, Ann. We'll be married 63 years, June 24th. And she said that living with me was much like a religious experience, a living hell. And the classy lady, there she is. And so this is a real treat, and I'm very honored. And when I received the invitation from Mike Devine, and he sent me material about who had received this in the past, and I just about canceled out right there because of the amazing cast of Americans that have gone before. Actually, I felt a bit like a jackass at the Kentucky Derby. I knew I couldn't win, but the association would be helpful. And I want to tell you that I always believed in my heart that, especially in my life in politics, that I always felt a severe sense of smugness, not hubris, that's bad stuff, that I shared some of the traits of Harry Truman. The number one for me was the buck stops here, because I always believed that, and in my political life, I believed you shouldn't do excuses, no scapegoating, take your lumps, if you get your foot in your mouth, and when you have a 16-6E shoe, this is difficult. But I have that, and you get that out of your own gullet. And my rule of thumb was very simple. When they're after your ass, answer the phone, which I did with regularity. And the staff would say, my God, don't do that. We got to spin this thing somehow. You can't do that. I said, well, I spun it. I spun it off into space. I know, but you sounded like a nut. I said, I was. And so I will get my foot out of it and extricate myself and call them. And they'll say, did you say this? And I'll say, I did. And it might not go well with them, but at least I felt better. I didn't have gas ulcers, heartburn, or BO in that situation. Now, I had a very rugged father who was much like Harry Truman, and he served as governor of Wyoming and U.S. Senator of Wyoming. He had guts and heart and humor, played his cards face up. That is, if the game called for that. If it didn't, he kept them face down, I can assure you that. He loved to take on the big powers and the tough issues of life. And his worst one, and it cost him a defeat, so I watched that. The law of Wyoming was that if a person was convicted by a jury of a felony and sentenced to death, and then it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the sentence of death, then the governor was the person who was to make the final decision. Well, my mother got to him on that one, and she said, you know, the Lord says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So I knew that got to the old man. So he commuted this guy who had murdered 3 people and dozens of witnesses. And that sunk him because, you know, Wyoming was a place where in those days, you just had 6 guys under a tree with a rope, and they had a jury, and then they strung them up. So that was the end of that for him. But I thought, boy, that takes a lot of guts to be opposed to the death penalty. At least he said, I'm not going to pull that lever. And of course, Harry made so many tough decisions, and they're all in that marvelous library. Now, it was a great honor to speak there in November, so some of you are gluttons for punishment to come back to this. And you have a great leader there in Kurt Graham, who you stole from us in Wyoming at the Buffalo Center of the West. And then you had Mike Devine, who you stole from the University of Wyoming. And we don't have that many people to allow this to continue. This is an attrition that is not respected. Well, there's another tie here. Our granddaughter was a Truman Scholar of the state of Wyoming. Went on to Notre Dame, and as I was telling Tom, the old priest over here, there's a good egg. I like that guy. And Jesuits settled Wyoming, too. I told him that. I mean, history just oozes from my pores. And so she graduated summa cum laude, which in our family no one even knew how to pronounce. I did not graduate cum laude. I graduated thank the Lawdy. And she now works in South Bend for the Kellogg Foundation, a lovely and devout and beautiful young woman. Well, I was just thinking, seeing Mary there and all of you, where the hell are the Eisenhowers and the Trumans when we really need them? There were leaders. There they were. And it is extraordinary. Harry had this remarkable ability. He had goodness. He had enthusiasm. He had good humor. an extraordinary ability to communicate with everybody. The bartenders, the people in the street, the porters, the people in the White House. He was a great human being. It reminded me of the phrase of Will Rogers, who said, "It's great to be great, but it's greater to be human." And that's what he was. And he was about himself, and yet he had a great empathy for others. And I think in history, if you look at the history of Abe Lincoln and Harry Truman, and when they came on the scene, let me tell you, it was pretty tough. They were joked about, they were made fun of, they were called bums and boobs, and they were ridiculed and were called buffoons and clowns and crooks, all reviews of their fellow citizens. You'd think that would stop them. Well, look how they handled it. They handled it with courage and an uncommon degree of common sense. Whatever the hell happened to common sense? Most extraordinary absence from the world today. So, here he was, plain speaking, patriotic, both of them. And sometimes they spoke in a way that might have escaped the understanding and complexity of the overwrought mind, but stuck right in the heart and craw of the guy on the street who has been inoculated against BS. I could have gone further there into the vernacular of the West, but Anne cleared her throat right at that point. But you know what I mean. I could have taken it to its next level. So there it was. He knew what that was. And that was his power, and that was part of his leadership. Now, a little more about Harry here. These are all my notes. People aren't looking. They're scribbled on heavily. It's all my stuff. I never had a speechwriter. People understand that quickly when I speak. A little more about that. I was going home from school on Cody High School, of course, April 12th, 1945. Got home and they said that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had died. Well, Ann's family had a bust of Franklin Roosevelt on their mantle. We did not have that in our home. And I could go on from there, but I dare not. But nevertheless, don't forget what happened right then. Who do we get now? What a terrible thing. We've lost our greatest president. Well, we got Harry Truman. Well, who the hell is Harry Truman? Well, some guy named Truman. He's a haberdasher. He was a crook there with a machine called the Pendergast gang. That's what he was, and he doesn't know anything. And he's taken the place of our greatest president. And what did Harry do? He pulled together a few of his chums that day, called from his Senate chambers. And he said, I have an awful big job coming, and I'm going to need a lot of help. Poured out a little whiskey all around and said, here we go. Kind of like a saying that we have in the West in rodeo. It's sit deep in the saddle, grab a tight rein, throw open the chute, and holler, let her buck. And not only did he let her buck, and rode it out, he kept that buck right in front of him, the one that said, it stops here. So, speaking quickly of whiskey in Wyoming and water, very precious. Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. That's the way we clear that up in that. And so, Harry liked a little bit of whiskey. I don't think Sherry would have touched a nerve with him, but it's a nice idea. I didn't have any. A little Sherry there, and a little card playing, a little storytelling. Wonderful, earthy humor, not the humor that you see today where you make fun of somebody. He wasn't into that kind of humor. He was into the kind of humor where you just laugh deep in your gut and throw your head back and laugh like hell. That's the kind of humor he had. There were even little more things about him. How bad it was. I'll never forget this one. They've used it again in the latter campaigns. That he was in a plane and he said, I have a $100 bill. Should I throw it out and please one person, or shall I throw out 100 ones and please 100? And the guy said, throw yourself out and please everybody. And he knew that politics was a contact sport. It ain't beanbag. And sometimes Harry would respond to his inquisitors, and he had a penchant for that too. He would respond rather tartly sometimes. And somebody said to me once, Al, are you thin-skinned? And I said, yes, I am. You bet. Because if you're in politics, you're entitled to be called a fool, boob, idiot, bonehead, slob, you know, butthead, stupid ass, and you know I could take that even further, but I'm not going to do it because Ann cleared her throat again. But what in the world, you're entitled to be called those things, but never let anyone distort who you are. And in politics, when suddenly I'd get into everything I touched in politics was filled with emotion, fear, guilt, and racism. Everything. Veterans issues, immigration, nuclear, Social Security, you name it. Emotion, fear, guilt, and racism, that's how you pass or kill a bill now in the U.S. Congress, by a deft blend of those tools. So Harry, of course, would crack through that because of preparation and doing his homework and prepare and outwit him, and come back hard and fair. The thing about that is you wake up at 3 at night and you say, that's my name they're distorting. That's not you. And the people who are telling you not to respond are the people who love you the most. Your wife, your brother, your mother, your father, brothers, sisters. And they say, you're not going to get down on their level, are you? And I'd say, watch this. Because an attack unanswered is an attack believed, especially in these times. People will believe anything. Furthermore, an attack unanswered is an attack agreed to. So if you're going to go into politics, as I say, they can call you anything, but never let them take your persona and twist it. I never lost an election, and I took on some of the goofiest bastards you can ever met. Now, enough of that. That got that. These notes, I just a few more pages here. I heard that someone went 45 minutes here, obviously lacking the proper terminal facilities. Now, I'm going to toss that one out. I have no time for that one. Yes, I think that they should add a couple of letters to that beautiful stone of Harry's at the library. The letter L twice. L for loyalty and L for leadership. Unalloyed loyalty to Bess and to Margaret and to his country and to the military. Unalloyed loyalty. And loyalty to the office of the president and to his own moral code of life leadership. Leadership is tough to describe, but you sure know it when you see it. And that was him. And the reason why, in my mind, was because he was a risk taker. And if you're not a risk taker, not only should you get out of leadership, you should get out of life. And let me tell you what it is. It's a dilemma. And I'll share it with you because to laugh is to risk appearing a fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk rejection. To place your dreams before the crowd is to risk ridicule. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To go forward in the face of overwhelming odds is to risk failure. But risk must be taken because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he cannot, yes, that word, cannot learn. He cannot learn. He cannot feel, he cannot change, he cannot grow or love. He is chained by his certitudes. He is a slave. He has forfeited his freedom. Only a person who takes risks is free. That, to me, sounds a lot like Harry, to me, because he took those risks. Look at the big ones, the military, the segregation, the bomb, the works. So, I find that is an amazing trait. I used it in my own life and took on a lot of heat, a lot of things. But when Harry, he was a bit ornery and crusty when he came home, but he was that way when he was in office. And I got entangled up in things. I won't even go on to them. When we did the Clean Air Act, I was called a soot-covered slob. Because I was from Wyoming, and if Wyoming were a country, we'd be the biggest coal-producing country on earth. I did make a crack. You won't believe it, Henry. I said, you mean to tell me a guy who served 6 months and never left Camp Beetle Bailey gets the same, and doesn't know a mortar tube from either end, gets the same benefit as a combat veteran? They said, yeah. I said, to hell with that. So we at least raised it to a year. And of course, the VFW tore my underwear off. But I'm a lifetime member of the VFW and the American Legion, and proud of that. But you got to do what you have to do. And the AARP has a monument to me in their headquarters. You've heard of ARP. You pronounce it ARP. They have taken me as a private curse. There are 39 million of these people, and they're very formidable, and they have the medical, preservation of Medicare and Social Security, the Gray Panthers, the silver-haired legislators. I am on their lists. Because I noticed in your magazine that you have the most amazing things there. These are 39 million Americans bound together by a common love of airline discounts, RV discounts, insurance discounts, investment deals, scooters, cruises, walk-in bathtubs, and erectile dysfunction ads. And they don't give a rat's ass about their grandchildren, so I think we can move on from the AARP, and they are atrocious, and they are interested in only people over 50. And imagine what's going to happen to these beautiful young people that I met today. It's sad. And you can do something about it. She cleared her throat. You didn't hear that. But I did. But enough of that. I strayed there. I'm getting right here. I nearly went into a rant, and I have done that. So anyway, Pat Moynihan, Senator Moynihan once said, he said, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but nobody is entitled to their own facts. That's a wonderful statement, and he was a great leader and a great guy to work with. I believe he or Harry, someone said, anyway, you don't have to be a wizard to be a leader. I think he said the world is run by C students. I don't know who said that. May have been me. I had D's. D's are interesting things to get in class. Now, you have to make up for whatever lacks and fears you have. You make it up with determination and perseverance and dogged guts and energy and courage and spirit and humor, always humor. My mother taught me that humor is the universal solvent against the abrasive elements of life. And it is. It really is. It's the salvation. And Harry had that. He sure had that. It always throws off the opposition. Serious people are easy to snow because they'll say, this guy, Simpson's a nut. He told stories. If you saw the movie Lincoln, when the guy said, is going to go in there and listen to that nut tell some story again? They said, yeah. He said, I can't stand it. Enough of that. So all the presidents I've worked with, 4 of them, and I personally have met 11 in my life, all would talk about the humor and the character of Harry Truman. And those are tough things because you violate a confidence or a trust, or you do it or they do it, and still stay loyal, and you have to give in order to get. And my dad taught me, if you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, then do. You ought to write that one down, you children out there. There'll be a test. If you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, then do. It's pretty simple. Harry knew another one about his own personal life and religion. You have to know where to turn when you don't know where to turn. He had that gift. That is a tremendous gift. Where to turn when you don't know where to turn. Yeah, I know that sounds corny in these times, but we all learn that one somewhere along the line. And if you don't, you really never get it all together. That is a truth. It is not preaching. The leader is also a believer in something higher, a believer in the people he leads, a believer in truth, a believer in ethics, a believer in morality, and a believer in his own self. All of us want to be loved, all of us, especially we politicians, and we want to be ever popular, but it ain't always going to be that way if you're a true leader. My credo in politics, and here's the definition of it. I have one more page here. Don't clear your throat. In politics, there are no right answers. Only a continuing flow of compromises among groups, resulting in a changing, cloudy, and ambiguous series of public decisions where appetite and ambition compete openly with knowledge and wisdom. That's all there is. Can't get a better one. That is mine, beautifully creative, I thought of. Now, that's that. Throw that one out. 2 more minutes. Harry was a great chum of Sam Rayburn, a Democrat, former Speaker of the House, and they went into the minority. And Sam Rayburn said, well, we're in the minority now, but we're still going to be helpful and constructive. Remember, any jackass can kick over a barn door. It takes a carpenter to build one, unquote. Well, there's a lot of jackass and carpenter in all of us, and Sam Rayburn knew the role of a good leader was to bring out the carpenter, and hopefully they'll begin to remember that in Washington. And of course, he had at his side the marvelous Bess. You have to have an amiable companion at your side in this line of work. makes all the difference. Harry had that. I had that. You come home after a horrendous day of dealing with the crowds and the VIPs and the jerks and the idiots of the day, and have to want to share it with someone who loves you and will criticize you in a kindly way, ordinarily, and speak either in Shakespearean prose or lyrical profanity. And so it is with this woman at my side. And since I'm really trying to be a good neighbor, I'm going to cut it off. But I want you to remember this. Good neighbor. It's interesting. The Bible says, love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, you want to look at that one again pretty well. Because sometimes in our own pettiness and smallness and our selfishness, we really aren't treating ourselves very well. So if the neighbor is getting the short ration, he sure is, if that's the way you're doing with your own life. Harry never gave anybody a short ration. He gave them the whole load. And they loved it, and they loved him. And I hunch you might sift from these remarks of mine, which are held here back in the eye of my mind, when I was in a tough spot. What would Harry do, I would say? So I share with you this day, he was my idol. God bless you.